Hello and welcome to week 3 Gridiron Astrology. I'm Jess and I'm here with
Dorje, and good to see you again, Jess. Last week was such an exciting week. I felt like a lot of teams that looked like they were really on a roll actually lost, and so the league balanced out a bit. That was really just awesome to see. Yeah, awesome to see. But this week, I'm super excited. Our game of the week is the Chiefs versus the Giants, and that seems like an obvious game. It seems like an
yes.
obvious game to me. The Chiefs should win. The Chiefs, they've been to the last three Super Bowls and they won two of them. They are like a dynasty. If you're ever going to call a team a dynasty, they're a dynasty. But
Absolutely.
they have been stunned this season. They are 0-2, and it's the first time they've been 0-2 since 2014. So what
Wow.
is going on at Arrowhead? That's the question. However, they're playing the Giants, who are used to 0-2. This is the third straight season they've been 0-2. It's the seventh season in 9 years they've been 0-2. They're coming in as, depending which betting site you use, 5.5 underdogs or 6-point underdogs. So then, the Chiefs have never actually lost three straight games under Patrick Mahomes as quarterback.
Really? I did
Yeah,
not know that. It makes
that's
sense though
amazing.
because he's really a star, truly.
He is, yeah, yeah. And he's one of these quarterbacks who just wills wins like Tom Brady used to. So this is everything on paper says looks like the Chiefs are going to win. But maybe we should look at the astrology before we make that judgment.
I think that's a great idea. You ready to
Yeah.
dive in?
Yeah, let's dive in. Yeah. Would you
Okay.
would you start and then I'll follow in?
I love. So I'm still using the Frawley method and I'm also using my own delineations. I want to start with the Frawley method just because consistency. But what I noticed is almost nothing about this game mapped onto Frawley's method. Almost
Hmm.
nothing at all. And there are two things that I pulled where I'm like, maybe we can make this work, but it's a stretch. It's going beyond the framework that Frawley has established. And I want to note that up front. So I don't want to go through every one of the different components that he assesses, just what is most outstanding. And I'm going to actually start with the questionable one because we get to decide if it is valuable. Now,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, Dorje, the clear favorites in this game are the Chiefs. And if that is the approach that we are taking, then we look at the ascendant as the favorite and the dispositor of the ascendant. So the ruler of, not the, well, the ruler of the ascendant, which is a very sad 29-degree Libra Mars. We're about to get some dignity by way of Mars shortly, but we're not there yet. Does it transition during this game or no? No,
Oh boy, I don't think so.
I don't
That's
think so. It's too, yeah, okay. However, the Chiefs are associated with a debilitated Mars. Not great. The underdogs, which would be the Giants in this case, are associated with excuse me, I'm all wrong. The away team is associated with a fallen Virgo Venus. Sorry. The descendant, which is the underdog, which is the Giants, are actually associated with this 29
Mhm.
degree Libra Mars. Excuse my mix up. All of this to say, neither of them are in good shape. That's really the take home message here. Okay. So, Frawley's method, the home team, or excuse me, the favorites have this horrific Venus, not horrific. I really like Venus in the sign of Virgo personally, but in terms of dignity, struggling. And then the underdogs home team have a similar signature. Now, we want to look at the dispositor of the part of fortune, and the part of fortune, I believe, is in the sign of Libra. And I'm just checking, just kidding, Taurus. It's a couple of degrees off of the ascendant in Taurus. And so the ruler of that part of fortune is Venus, Venus in the sign of Virgo. And
Mhm.
what we notice in this space is not only is it the ruler of the part of fortune, but it's actually making and applying trine to the part of fortune. Now, Frawley prefers conjunctions, opposition, doesn't care too much about the sextiles, the trines, or anything like that. So that's why I'm saying it's questionable. I don't know if this is something that he would say is valuable, but if we are being flexible with it a little bit, then this is a point in favor of the favorites, not to be redundant, but that would be the Chiefs. And the only other indicator that we have is that we have the ruler of the part of fortune, again, Venus in the sign of Virgo, co-present with the South Node. Not a conjunction. Here again, Frawley might be like it needs to be within a degree or two to count,
Mm.
But there is a story here. There is a co-presence. This is actively during an eclipse moment. This is actually a signifier for the underdog. I'm assuming it's the south node of it all, where, that may suggest the underdog. But this is a stronger point, in my opinion, in favor of the underdog. So those are the only 2 points that I have. With Frawley's method, the only one that I think may be valid is the one in favor of the underdog. So I'm saying that Frawley would be in support of the Giants winning. So take that
Wow.
as you will.
Wow.
My own method is a little bit different. I got a little bit caught up with the ascendant ruler and the descendant ruler. The way I look at it is the away team is associated with the ascendant. Here again, we still have Virgo Venus. Descendant is going to be associated with the home team. The story that I see here that is pretty compelling is the away team is undergoing some type of metamorphosis with the eclipse happening in real time. I
Hmm.
think, and I'm curious what you think, we have a couple of other charts to look at, of course, with regards to the Giants specifically and the Chiefs specifically. But I think not necessarily this season, but we're starting to see the decline in the sort of supreme reign that the Chiefs had for
Mm.
close to a dozen years. I don't think that means they're falling off. I think it's a difference in tempo. And then I think when we look at the Giants, which are again associated with this Mars in the sign of Libra, that's also ruled by Venus in the sign of Virgo, they're just kind of doing what they always do, which is not being especially sturdy or stable. And I think that there are a couple of stories going on in their individual charts that speak to that. But I will
Hmm.
tell you, Dorje, and I'm curious what your experience was. In looking at this chart, it is a lot more complicated. It was hard for me to pick a clear, like, yes, this is the winner. How did you feel?
Oh, I'm totally on board with that. Using Bonatti's methods, which I'll go through in just a minute.
Mhm.
It's a story of the halves too, but in
Yes.
neither half is there a dominant sign. And this is really interesting to me because the last 2 weeks we did this, I really felt like it was clear who the winner would be. And then so it was relatively easy to pick out last week that the Detroit Lions were going to win
Yeah.
and that they're going to go over the Bears. And boy, did they ever. Like, we just made really good calls in that game. I had a 4-pick parlay. I chose the
Yes.
Detroit Lions, the over 46, 250 yards, Jared Goff. He eclipsed that, and Jamar Gibbs for a touchdown. And that all worked really well based on our analysis. And going into this week, with the Chiefs versus the Giants. I might put $5 on the parlays I recommend here at the end,
Yeah.
but I am very, very cautious because it is just like really, really fine-tuned. And one of the things Bernadette Brady used to say was that really you're playing percentages and
Okay.
the chart is meant to help you understand where the percentages are so that you're more likely to win if the chart's really going one way. So the odds are a little more in your favor if you follow that. But on this chart, like I'm like, neither team looks like
I
they're
am with you.
yeah. I mean, look, there's a grand trine there. Like, if it had been the sun or the moon or Mercury, activating that grand trine with Pluto or Uranus, indicating one of the teams, it might have been a whole different story.
I agree with this.
But it's like this Mars, which is opposed Chiron, and it's this Venus, which is square Uranus. And so we'll see. We'll
Ooh,
see.
that's a really good catch. I was looking at this Grand Trine. I'm like, ooh, maybe a lot of passing, more of a passing game than ground game was kind of here with the moon as part of the
Mhm.
conversation with the
Yep.
Grand Trine, but I'm interested to see how that unfolds. Now, I do have a couple of other charts. Are you ready to check those out?
Yeah, yeah, let's look at them. I'm excited here. Hmm.
So, tri-wheel chart. Innermost wheel is the game that we are talking about, the chart we just looked at. This middle wheel is the New York Giants, and the outermost wheel is, of course, the Chiefs. Now, one thing that I will say is there are many event charts that, a football team starts in a particular city and then they move elsewhere. I've been playing with this with the Chargers and the Raiders, and even with the Chiefs. They start in one city and then they relocate. And it seems like the relocated charts are more valuable in terms of
Oh,
predictive
interesting.
ability. I'm
Right.
still toying with that, but this Chiefs chart seems to hold up pretty well. And again, tracking the Chargers and the Raiders, I'm like, well, if it's this chart, then the Chargers are definitely going to win. And if it's this one, then they're not in as great of shape. And again, the relocated chart seems to be more valuable. Now, what's interesting to me, and I really want to start with
Ooh.
what's highlighted here, is the transiting Uranus recently entered the sign of Gemini. It's now on its retrograde trajectory back toward Taurus, but we actually have a 0-degree Gemini sun that is associated with the Chiefs in particular. So there's
Hmm.
some shakeup in the dynasty actively happening. And we
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
see, where is Chiron in this mix? I don't know if it was a Chiron story. It's a Chiron return story as well.
Hmm.
Specifically, actually, this is more for the Giants. So we'll talk about that in a second. But in the next several years, Chiron is going to be making its way toward the Chiefs' dignified Taurus Venus. And so I just think that there is a narrative of the upheaval that they are experiencing at the start of this season may kind of be setting the stage for the next 5 to 7 years. Not in that they, come from the very top and now they're at the bottom, but there are changes. There are changes that are taking place. The other thing that is on like a more direct game basis, this is a longer lasting transit, as you likely all know, but we have a Venus return moment for the Giants, which I
Hmm.
think can be valuable. But if we contextualize that in the Chiron return, which happens once every, 55 years, give or take
Hmm.
56 years, they're not looking hot in a general sense. Wherever they are struggling in terms of personal authority, in terms of like clarity and cohesion, in terms of the team dynamics, the powers that be, that's really strongly exaggerated. So I don't know if this Venus return is giving that much for the Giants this week or in general. On the flip side, we do see that the transiting Venus is forming and applying trine to the Chiefs Venus. I think that's kind of nice. And we also know that Patrick Mahomes is a Virgo. And
Hmm.
so he has this Virgo Venus signature starting to illuminate his sun at minimum by way of co-presence. So all of that to say, Chiefs are undergoing some type of changes internally in terms of how their sort of dynasty is being run. That's something that's longer term, not this game. And we also see that the Giants are getting some support, but they are also going through considerably more hardship that I think is generally more pronounced. Is there anything that you see here that you would like to touch on?
Oh, I mean, j just talking about the Chiron return,
Yeah.
once every 55 years, Chiron's like the wound, right? And it's there in Aries leadership. And
Yes.
there's already calls for them to sack the head coach
Yeah,
because on paper the team is fairly talented, but there's
absolutely.
nothing coming together for them on
No,
the field.
no.
Well, I mean, they did put up a lot of points. They did put up a lot of points last week. How much was it? I forget.
Over 30, 30
Over,
something.
yeah,
I could
it
be
was a
making that up.
lot of points.
Yeah.
And the thing with that was though that the defense fell apart at the end.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there was not cohesive leadership that could carry the team through. Even if Russell Wilson came out and slung that ball all over the field and got 450 yards, they could not hold the game in their possession. They could, and so that Chiron return looks to me like a crisis of leadership.
Yeah.
And I would definitely expect that this coach, unless he turns it around, which you can do because
Sure.
Chiron is not just the wound, it's also how the self becomes. Because
Yep.
the self comes from its wounds.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
And that's true in a personal narrative, but also a game narrative where this is how the team can form its identity this year, should it overcome that wound. Which I don't know. I mean, if they beat the Chiefs, they're going to go a long way,
I
don't you know?
know.
People
I
are going to be like,
know.
"Yay!" Then we'll have two narratives next week. Wow, the Giants are turning the corner, and boy, the Chiefs really are just horrible this year. I don't know what to say about that Sun conjunct Uranus. I did notice that. And to me, there's this quality there of the unexpected. Now, is that turnovers? Is that injuries? Is that them just playing completely horribly? Or is that them suddenly coming out and putting up a ton of points? I don't know. I do agree with you that it looks to me like that indicates an air game. And for that reason, one of my prop bets is Mahomes gets 2 touchdowns and the over on his yards.
Nice.
So I'm feeling like that way too. But do you have anything else to show us or elucidate to us or throw at us about what this game could possibly hold, Jess?
Absolutely. There are 2 points that I want to touch on. And the first one is a direct question to you because you mentioned it to me before we connected for our session today. Now, both of the teams do have Virgo Pisces placements, but a question here is, do you think Uranus at 25 degrees in the Giants chart is close enough to this 29-degree Virgo eclipse to have an impact on the game? Because we're talking about a couple of things here, a wider orb, obviously, but there's also the fact that it's an outer planet.
Right. Yeah. No, I am not going to propose that that eclipse will hit an outer planet with that
Okay.
far of an orb. I mean, that's just like I think I played marbles a little bit when I was a kid. I don't remember what or whether, but it was in the lore. And so that's like, well, there's just something way outside there in the circle and it kind of hits, but it doesn't affect what's going on in the center at all. So I could see that as, again, like maybe some just wacky turnovers
Yeah,
would be what
that's
that
great.
might indicate to me, but and that could go either way.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you feel, Jess, about Uranus as a malefic or a benefic?
I am Team Malefic, or excuse me, whoa, maybe that's what I am. I think it's neutral, but I tend to view it more as a benefic. So
Yeah, same here.
who knows? I have
Yeah.
it angular. Do you have a strong signature with Uranus as part of the conversation, or have you just sort of noticed, like, oh no, it's all right?
No, I do not have a strong signature with it. It is in my 10th house, which, creates
Huh?
certain problems, whether it's
Sure.
benefic or malefic. If you have Uranus in the 10th house, you're going to pop off and say some crazy things, do some crazy things. It's really good for like teaching you how to be a better human in the long run if you're trying to be conscious.
Yeah.
If you're not, then you can like just really disrupt the workspace if you have Uranus in the 10th
Yes,
house.
I hear that.
So in that way, it can be malefic because
Mhm.
it's anti the norm, and anti the norm can at times be very difficult.
Certainly. I find that the positive nature is if you're willing to embrace whatever it throws at you, and that could really push the sort of outer boundaries of your comfort zone. If you're willing to sort of ride with that, it really does seem to benefit the individual where it's like, I could not imagine my life had I not experienced this major transit, had I
Mm,
not engaged with it. And specifically what I'm talking about is Uranus conjunctions by way of transit to natal chart planets. But nonetheless, I personally quite like it. I have Patrick Mahomes' noon chart as well. And this is just echoing that eclipse story because we see his sun is at 24 degrees in the sign of Virgo. Now, this is an inner
mm,
planet, it's one of the luminaries. It's
mhm.
a little bit different, a lot of bit different than a generational planet like Uranus. Do you see this as sensitive to this 29-degree eclipse?
Oh, that's such a challenge. Again, like my formative eclipse teacher was Brady, and she was like 2 degrees max, three
Wow.
degrees, and that's 5 degrees, but it's the luminary.
Yeah.
And what
Yep.
gets eclipsed? The luminary gets eclipsed.
Yep.
And then it's also though 2 degrees in front of the Chiron, and that had me worrying about him getting injured.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
all of the marks there with the Uranus, the sun, chief sun being conjuncted by the Uranus, is that right? And then the eclipse right there, just kind of splitting the line between the sun and the Chiron and the Venus. Um, yeah, has me a little bit concerned for that Patrick Mahomes. A lot would depend on his rising sign too.
That's
Like
true.
does that Venus, I mean, is that Venus and Chiron, is that falling in the 12th house by whole sign? Is it falling in the second house? Is it falling in the eighth house? Like, what is really getting activated? Don't
Absolutely.
have the time chart, can't really comment on that, but I can say that this furthers the narrative in my mind. And from watching the Chiefs, not watching the games, but just watching the highlights,
Mhm.
I feel like something's not quite right with Patrick Mahomes this season.
I
I
agree,
feel like he's
unfortunately.
not as focused as he is, or he doesn't care as much. Like Maybe he has to have a season in the doghouse and be dragged through the ashes in order to have a rebirth narrative. And maybe
Yeah.
this is that. Maybe he's just bored of winning.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's affecting him. I think that's going to
Yeah.
affect the season, whether they win or lose this game. I do think that this is a season that's going to be some inner soul searching for Patrick Mahomes.
I agree. And we see that there's the co-presence of the transiting Pisces Saturn with his natal Pisces Saturn. I tend to
Mhm.
look at, there's
Yeah.
multiple points you can look at the Saturn return, but the widest definition I use is when it's in the same sign as the natal Saturn. And so while there will not be an exact conjunction, it will be within about 4 degrees when it stations direct. I think that's part of this as well. Again, we don't know the houses, but there usually is some constraint, some frustration in terms of injury. Not that I love to watch him play. I never wish illness or pain on anyone ever. But I'm curious if lower body, ankle, foot, I could even
Hmm.
see, I mean,
Oh,
like
right. Yep.
low back here, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking like hip, some type of mobility component that hinges on foot, or I don't know, break, something like that. Again, hopefully
Ooh.
not. Want to see him succeed, but that's what's outstanding to me here.
Well, and then you get into the principle of like, do you see that over and over again in the chart? Well, okay, let's take a look. Like the game's descendant is conjunct his Mars. That's also like, how does that play out? Does that mean he just completely dominates because the descendant in the game chart rules the Giants, according
Mm,
to how Frawley looks at it and how Bonatti looks at it? Or is that there's a danger there for him?
yeah.
Symbolically his Mars is going to set in this game. It's an interesting question, and that's why I love this game. It has so many more interesting questions in the charts than the last two games that we did.
I agree very much. Now, I do have a couple of other charts, but I really want to make sure that you have the time and the space to talk about Bonatti and your predictions. So, the take home from mine, Frawley is predicting the Giants. I again am defying what Frawley has to say, and I am picking the Chiefs. This was a very tough game for me. Typically, when it's tough, it's usually a closer game because the story's not clear in the chart. As you mentioned with
Yep.
Bernadette Brady, there's like a percentage component. I think that this is less, well, I can't say that because it's an eclipse game, but I'm not sure if this is as faded. I think that there's some free will components really informing how this is showing up.
Oh,
So I'm going,
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna pop up here my charts and we'll just get going with that. Did that show up?
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to remove Patrick Mahomes, and we're just going to start with the 820 chart. Now, to determine like who the ruler is and who the winner is going to be, there's a real kind of logical progression that Bonatti does. So that you take the ruler of the first as a challenger, and here that's going to be the Chiefs. And again, as I explained in the first time that we got together, the first episode, that can be a little bit, it can be a little bit iffy because there's another way you can look at it, which is since the Chiefs are favored,
Yeah.
they should be the seventh. But I like the home field, and we are using what's called the battlefield technique. And the battlefield technique is whoever's home you're on, that's who the seventh is, and whoever's invading that home, that's who the first is. So we're going to take the ruler of the first as a challenger, that would be the Chiefs, and the ruler of the seventh as a home field team, that would be the Giants. Now, again, we split it in two halves using this technique because it's two distinct starts to the game. And if you watch football enough, you really do understand how the coaches actually do adjust strategies
Yes.
during the halftime, which is it's amazing to me to think about. It's 15 minutes, but somehow they go in there and they like shift what they're doing and shift what all the players are doing in 15 minutes usually, which is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So the Chiefs are represented by Venus being the ruler of Taurus and the Giants by Mars, the ruler of Scorpio. Bonatti made a point of saying that on the battlefield that the superior planets are better for warfare. And so whoever has
Yeah.
the superior has a leg up. On the battlefield, we want aggression, and so that's going to go to the Giants. They're going to be a little bit more aggressive. What kind of aggression is that? Well, that's Mars in the last degree of Libra. Is that really an aggressive Mars? I mean, this might be the least aggressive Mars that you get. So I don't know how they're going to do with that. And that's part of the nuance of what we got going on here. Whereas the Chiefs are going to be Venus in the sign of Virgo in the fall. And to me, that's really a sign that there is a lot of mental disconnect going
Yeah.
on with the Chiefs right now. I don't know what that's about, but we're not hearing rumors of locker room troubles. Although we are seeing Kelsey throw some fits and tantrums on the field that seems like he shouldn't be. I don't know. I mean, it seems like Kelsey should be the happiest he could ever be. He's marrying one of the richest, most successful, popular women in the world right now. But I mean, maybe that's pulling him out of the game. Maybe he doesn't want to be there anymore. I think he did say he's looking at retiring. Yeah, and so that might be kind of like part of what's going on is these pressures within the relationships of Kelsey affecting Mahomes, affecting everybody, and the backroom dynamics. Who knows? But that Venus is in fall, so it's a little bit strange. Generally, that Mars is going to outdo the Venus because you want aggression, not love on the battlefield. And the
Yeah.
football game is a battlefield. Um, so then that slightly edges it towards the Giants. So then we want to determine the strength of the ruler next, according to
Okay.
the Bonatti method. And the ruling planet zodiacal condition becomes the main factor of the judgment. The Chiefs are going to be ruled by fall in Venus in fall, square Uranus, which is, again, it's a little bit tricky. And to me, that means inconsistent play from the Chiefs. That
Okay.
they might come out and they might score really quickly.
Mhm.
They might score a couple drives really quickly and then they might fall on their face. There's some kind of inconsistency there. I'm using the word fall intentionally. Venus, however, it is in the fifth house by whole sign, and so that is its place of joy. So on the other hand, they might be having a lot of fun. Even if they're not incredibly focused, there might be moments where they're like, hey, this is easy. It's the Giants. We're just rolling over them. It's delightful. So
Mhm.
Venus is going to get some points from that. The Giants being ruled by Mars, they're also in a tricky spot. I think the Giants come out slowly. I think that even though they're ruled by Mars, which is swift, and they're in an air sign, I think by slowly, maybe that there's some unforced errors that occurred, that they're stymied a bit in the first half. Mars is in detriment in Libra, but it has some dignity through term. Now, it's interesting because Venus is actually, and this is a question I wanted to ask you, Venus is actually has a lot of dignity points if you include its reception to Mercury. But that is problematic where some traditional astrologers, historically as well as in the present, start talking about how you cannot have reception with the planet you do not see, you
Yes.
do not behold. And so it's the Venus is in the Venus has Mercury. The correct term is, oh gosh, I just had it in my brain.
Oh,
So it's in aversion. Yeah. So
yes. Yes, yes,
Mercury is
yes.
an aversion to Venus. So can Venus really access the air yards that Mercury in Libra wants to give it? It's a question. So I would like look at the game and I would say dropped passes is going to be a theme for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I agree. And I personally, unless there is like a major aspect, I don't personally look at it as reception or mutual reception. But that is interesting that that story is part of the conversation. And I think that isn't that the dispositor? Mercury in the sign of Libra is the dispositor associated with Venus in the sign of Virgo. Yeah,
Yes,
because that's
yeah.
who he's answering to. So I think that there is a component of support. I don't know if it's as strong as mutual reception necessarily. The other thing that's standing out to me that I'm curious, we have Venus in its joy. Mars is also in its joy. And this is
Hmm.
the benefic
Right. Yep.
and malefic of sect
Yeah.
because it's a night game. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, they're both enjoying their sect.
Yeah.
However, I do think that Mars in the six gives the Giants the ability to grind it out and hang in. And that's
Okay.
going to be important in the second half. Because the second half is going to shift the narrative of the charts. And I'm coming to that. Thank you for the preview. So Mars is in a cadent house. It's a more detriment than Venus, probably just by being cadent with all of that added up. Plus Venus is the superior planet.
Yes.
And so also you give a little bit more to the superior planet. Through Bonatti's method, you're going to look at this chart and you're going to say the Chiefs are going to be on top at the end of the first half.
Okay.
However, if I sit here and we're going to go forward, and I used to go forward 90 minutes, I am now going, I mean, yeah, I used to go forward 90 minutes, I am now going for 100 minutes because I'm noticing that there's just some fudge time there in it, and you're safer at 100 minutes than you are
Okay.
at 90. So we're going to move here
Ooh.
and we're going to pop the ascendant, and then this tail is going to get really interesting to me. Because what we get now is we look here and the Chiefs get Mercury. Mercury is in the fifth house and it's got some dignity, but then the Giants get Jupiter.
Yes.
And Jupiter is in exaltation. To me, that's like, okay, they come out from behind, and coach is like, okay, Russell, just go air it out again. And Russell starts airing it out again and puts
Mhm.
up crazy yards again. Now it's interesting because Brady said that when Jupiter is in rulership or exaltation, you have to be careful because there's an excessive amount of enthusiasm that can
Ooh.
cost the game for the team that it signifies. And I do think that might be part of what we saw against the Cowboys last week, because Russell Wilson was putting up the yards, but he was also putting up the interceptions.
Yeah.
So we might see some of that again. However, just kind of like looking at it here, then we get Mercury gets 5 points of dignity through being the term and the triplicity ruler. It also has reception with Venus, but I can't really count it as mutual reception. I think again we just see some missed passes this half, perhaps even some interceptions because that
Yeah.
Mercury is roughly still opposed that Neptune, which is like there's just, some things are not being seen in the passing
Yes.
game by Mahomes. And the moon itself is also opposed that Neptune and opposed that Saturn. And to me, that means like there's miscues on both sides within the passing game. Now, Jupiter then is in the second house, which it's got a trine going towards roughly the north node and Saturn. It's approaching trine to Saturn. The other thing you want to look for is the significator of the chart. What is its next Ptolemaic aspect for some
Yeah.
indications of how that planet is going to do and play out? If we switch back to the Chiefs, the significator is Mercury. Its next Ptolemaic aspect is a square to Jupiter. It's a little bit complicated there. You get different theories going on. Jupiter is a benefic. Jupiter wants to do well. Jupiter wants to make the scale tilt slightly for that Mercury. But square is also it's something's off, something's not right, something's like the ball is kind of bouncing weird. They have to try
Hmm.
harder for it. And we get the exact same thing again if we look at Jupiter there. Its next aspect is trine to Saturn.
Hmm.
But Saturn is a malefic. Saturn means there's something hard going on there. But the trine is a benefic aspect.
Yeah.
So does that help them focus in, and does that help Russell Wilson not throw those interceptions that trine to Saturn? Does that create a little bit of discipline? The narrative is extremely complex in this chart, in my opinion,
Yes.
but I'm giving it a little bit more in the second half to the Giants
Okay.
because there's a little bit more of, again, the superior planet, both halves going to the Giants, the
Okay.
inferior planet, both halves going to the Chiefs. I feel like the Giants have just more spirit this game. And that's what's coming out for it. That's where it's coming out. I feel like the Chiefs are way too in their head
Yeah.
and way too in their emotions. The last thing you want to kind of consider is the moon and its aspects. The Challenger gets the planet of the last aspect that the moon made. And the last aspect is going to go to the Chiefs then, opposition to Neptune in Aries. Is everything okay in the Chiefs land? I mean, moon opposite Neptune, like to me, that's like Mahomes is not
Yeah.
being the leader that he usually is, or Kelsey's not being the leader that he usually is, that someone on that team is not leading the way that they should be. And then, if we look though at the moon, the next aspect, which will go to the defender for the Giants, that's going to be Mercury in Libra. And that's just much better off. So in my opinion, this leans it towards the Giants.
I would love
And
that.
yeah, I think you and I are both making like controversial calls there. I think everybody's
Yes.
like the Chiefs are going to win.
The interesting thing when you said about Moon opposite Neptune with regards to something being off with the Chiefs, in my mind, the phrase quiet quitting came
Hmm.
forward. And I don't
Hmm.
know if that would be in the context of Kelsey or Mahomes or both. Like it may be that the well oiled machine that they had going is starting to rust, is starting to get a little bit discombobulated, and that's impacting the level of investment. Not to say that they're not invested, obviously, but there's a different tempo, I think, that's afoot. And as you noted, that Neptune moon signature seems to be part of the story, the Mercury, Neptune, all of it.
Yes, yeah, no, I'm in 100% agreement with you on this. That there is, the something's off, and
Yes.
again, like in my mind, maybe it's just that they've won too much. And so
Yeah.
they need a
Yeah.
year of like, walking through the ashes, as Robert Bly might say, or as Joseph Campbell might say, in order to like rediscover their superpower. Because you can get bored, I mean, they're
Yeah.
already making the money and they've already like won and they already have like these amazing, commercial contracts, and they both have one, Kelsey and Mahomes, I assume both have really wonderful families that they're happy with, or forming
Yeah.
families that they're happy with. And, Reed has like, he's just winningest coach in history or whatever, close to it. And so what are they playing for?
That's true.
They
What's the
like,
soul of their team right now?
yeah, what's the soul of their team? I don't think they know right now. And I think that's the real trouble. And, Pacheco's having a hard time and running yards. Yes, what are you gonna say?
That might be Uranus conjoining their sun. What is the soul of
Right.
their team?
Yeah, 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 maybe so. So who do you think are the winners? How are you playing this out?
I think it's the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs are
Yeah.
going to win. Frawley thinks that the Giants are going to win. I would love a week when we are on the same page, me and Frawley, but we'll get there eventually. And
Yeah.
our
Yeah, I'm a. Little worried about Frawley, I mean, I'm sure he would say we weren't doing it right, like
yeah, yes.
and in his mind he would be right. We're not doing it right
This is
because
true.
but for me there's a couple like props I'm looking at.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily saying the Giants are going to win. I am saying I would take the spread for them at +6, maybe
Ooh.
even plus 5.5. Again, DraftKings, it's +6.
Hmm.
Vegas, it's plus 5.5. Vegas is a little bit tighter. Vegas is a little less confident with the Chiefs. DraftKings tends to be a little more influenced by the emotions of people. And
Okay.
I still think even if the Chiefs have a really, you know, bad year or whatever, it's going to take a while for people to think the Chiefs aren't the greatest team in football. We're just so used to it. That's been pounded into our head for so many years now. Then I'm looking at the over 44.5. Yeah, I'm definitely looking at the over right now. And the reason why I'm going to go back to, well, there's just a lot of air. The moon is in
Yes.
an air sign, Mercury is in an air sign. Jupiter here is it's trine the node. So I feel like there's a lot of air present in the chart, not as much, not as much earth present in the chart. Heavy earth ones, I'm thinking more of that the run games can be very powerful.
I'm with you there.
Then also I am looking at plus 230 yards for Wilson. 450 yards last week. I can't believe that the odds are giving us plus 230. And the week before I think the Giants scored a total of 230 yards, but that was him warming up.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit tempted to also do that with Patrick Mahomes. We know that the Chiefs have had a poor running game the last 2 weeks.
Hmm.
So it might be just like, okay, we'll start airing it out, Mr.
Yeah.
Mahomes. And then the final one is I do think 2 touchdowns from Mahomes is absolutely reasonable
Yeah.
because he's going to be doing his best.
I'm with you. That's
Uh,
great. Also, thank you so much always for incorporating the prop bets. I love listening to your logic and how you weave in the astrology to make them.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to again reiterate it though, with the prop bets, this is the least confident I've been so far this season on a game, and the DraftKings, the sports books, they're all
Yeah.
incredibly profitable because most people lose when betting. So if you have a little bit of extra, like I like doing $5 bets, that's not going to impact my budget and it's fun to win. Makes the game slightly more emotional. But gambling is a serious issue, and a lot of like evil corporate people make a lot of money off of it. And not even talking about Trump casinos, but just all these other people. And so it's a challenge. And if you're addicted to gambling, it's good to get help. But if you want to just, try a little bit here or there, those are my recommended prop bets for the week.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
Thank you, Jess. It's
Thank you.
illuminating as always. And I love your astrological knowledge connected to the football knowledge. In case you don't know it, Jess Campbell is a professional astrologer. Your website again, Jess?
SpicyGeminiAstrology.com. And I'm currently
Easy
booking
Gemini.
for October, whatever month is next, October of 2025. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And tell
Excellent.
me more
Yeah.
about where you're at. People know where
I,
you're at, but still.
Yeah, I'm at heartastrology.com and the books are open for both of us. And as you can see, we're both reasonable astrologers, employing traditional techniques as well as direct insight into the chart. And so I look forward to seeing you for next week's game and have fun watching this weekend's football.
Have fun, y'all.